Horrifying it is when an ordinary woman, simply for wearing the cleaning uniform of a luxury skyscraper, is dragged into a dark alley by two strange men and brutally beaten to the brink of death, just to send a message to the tycoon who owns that tower. Have you ever wondered what would happen if the most powerful man in Los Angeles, the one who rules an entire underworld empire, so wealthy that money has lost all meaning, yet whose heart has been frozen solid for 30 years, witnesses the entire savage scene through his security cameras? And in that split second, as he watches her collapse on the cold sidewalk, blood streaming down her face, something buried deep inside him suddenly shatters. Could a fierce, uncontrollable, all-consuming love explode in an instant between a cold-hearted Korean crime lord and the black single mother crushed by poverty and debt? Stay with me, because the story about to unfold will keep you glued to the screen. A tale of tragic romance, violence, redemption, and burning passion, where love defies not only the boundaries of wealth, race, and class, but confronts the ruthless underworld of Los Angeles itself. Before we dive into this chilling and mysterious story, please remember to subscribe to the channel Crimson Romance Stories and like this video. Every subscription, like, and share from you is a huge spiritual gift and an incredibly profound source of motivation for the channel's growth, so we can continue bringing wonderful videos every day to everyone. There would be no greater joy than receiving your love and support through the comments you leave right below this video. Comments sharing your emotions or telling us which province or city you're living and working in while listening to this story. All right, let's continue together and immerse ourselves in this amazing, captivating story that's filled with deep emotions. My name is Sung Min Park. In Los Angeles, people simply call me Mr. Park, or in the quieter corners of Koreatown and the back rooms of downtown, they just say Sung Min, with the kind of hush that makes conversations stop. At 42, I own towers that scrape the sky along Wilshire, underground card rooms that never close, and entire blocks of real estate from Silver Lake to the ports. My penthouse crowns the tallest of those towers, 55 stories of glass and steel, with floor-to-ceiling windows that turn the city into a private light show every night. I have private chefs who source prime Hanwoo beef flown in from Seoul, a temperature-controlled cellar filled with bottles worth more than most people's houses, and a garage of cars that gleam under soft lighting like museum pieces. Money has not been a question for me in 20 years. Yet every evening, when the staff leaves and the building falls silent, I sit alone at a dining table built for 14 and eat samgyetang my aunt still sends over in insulated containers every weekend. The broth is rich, fragrant with ginseng and jujubes, but it tastes like nothing when there is no one across from me. The loneliness is a living thing now, sharp, relentless, gnawing at the edges of my control. I have everything a man could buy and nothing that matters. 31 years ago, my parents brought me here from Busan with one suitcase each and dreams too heavy for their shoulders. My father built the foundation of this empire with his bare hands and unbreakable rules. My mother died 9 years later, her body wasted by cancer, while the medical bills climbed higher than anything we could pay. I cleared every debt, but I could not clear the guilt. I have spent every day since making certain no one can ever touch what is mine again. Power, territory, loyalty bought with fear and favor. I wrapped it all around me like armor, and in doing so, I buried whatever was left of my heart so deep I thought it was gone forever. Tonight is Tuesday, the night I meet my lieutenants in the private room at Ilhwa, the upscale Korean restaurant I own on the ground floor of my tower. The air is thick with the scent of charred galbi and quiet tension. My men sit around the long lacquered table, voices low, laying out maps of Koreatown, discussing shipments, percentages, and the Russians who have started testing our borders. I listen more than I speak. My word ends every debate, and they know it. My fair skin, sharp features, and the stillness I have cultivated since childhood still carry the weight my father taught me. Never raise your voice, never reveal weakness, never let anyone close enough to wound you. Because if they get close, they will find the place that still bleeds, and they will cut deeper. I have lived that truth for decades. It has kept me untouchable. It has kept me alone. Somewhere in this same building, on the night cleaning shift that begins when the executives leave, there is a woman I have seen only on the security monitors. Aisha Jackson, 27 years old, African-American, raising a 6-year-old boy named Malik by herself in a crumbling one-bedroom apartment in South Los Angeles with her cousin Brittany, who works the day concierge desk downstairs. Aisha pushes her cart through deserted hallways after midnight, emptying wastebaskets filled with takeout containers from meals that cost more than her daily wage, wiping down conference tables where deals worth millions are signed, vacuuming carpets that will be stepped on tomorrow by people who will never know her name. I know she has $58,000 in medical debt from her father's long illness, debt that grows every month like mold. I know the electricity in their apartment gets cut off when the bill is late. I know Malik sometimes wears the same sweater 3 days in a row because the laundromat costs too much. I know Aisha has not eaten a full meal in days at a time, that she works a second job stocking shelves at a 24-hour market when she can get the hours, that her hands are cracked from bleach and cold water, that her eyes carry bruises darker than skin, bruises made of pure exhaustion. I know all of this because nothing happens in my building that I do not see. But I have never spoken to her. She moves like a ghost through corridors of wealth, invisible to everyone, and I have let her remain invisible to me. It was safer. Caring opens a door, and through that door comes loss. Tonight, as my men argue quietly about how to answer the latest Russian provocation, my gaze drifts for a moment to the bank of monitors in the corner of the room. Aisha is on the 42nd floor, polishing the glass wall that overlooks the glittering sprawl of the city. Her reflection shows a woman too thin, shoulders curved inward against a cold that lives inside her bones. She pauses to press a trembling hand to her stomach, hunger, or perhaps the ache of knowing Malik went to bed with only half a peanut butter sandwich again. She does not know the camera watches. She does not know I watch. I force my eyes back to the table. Sentiment is weakness. Weakness invites death. But in the locked vault of my chest, something violent stirs. A guilt that never sleeps. A longing I have punished for years. A fear that all this empire has bought me is an even larger, colder grave. I pour myself another cup of soju, letting the clean burn steady the tremor no one else can see. Little do I know that in less than 2 days, the brutal world outside will smash through every wall I have built. A savage attack, a desperate cry for help, and a woman so crushed by poverty and injustice that her raw courage will reach straight into the ruins of my heart and ignite a love so fierce, so immediate, so all-consuming that it will burn away 30 years of ice in a single shattering instant. It was a Thursday night in late October, the kind of evening when the Santa Ana winds sweep down from the hills and turn the air dry and restless. I had stayed late in the penthouse office, reviewing ledgers that showed another quarter of record profits. My men had left hours earlier. The building was quiet, except for the low hum of the ventilation system and the distant murmur of the city far below. I told myself I was working, but the truth was simpler. I had nowhere else to go. The emptiness of the apartment waited beyond the glass doors, and I was delaying the moment I would have to face it again. On the security monitors, I watched Aisha Jackson finish her shift on the 38th floor. She moved slower than usual, pausing more often to lean against her cart. I noticed the way her hand pressed to her ribs, the slight tremor in her legs. Hunger, I thought. Or exhaustion so complete it felt like illness. She had not eaten since the half sandwich she shared with Malik at lunch. I knew because the building's cafeteria logs every employee meal, and hers had been blank for 3 days. The thought twisted something inside me, a dull ache I quickly pushed down. Sentiment is weakness. She clocked out at 11:30, pulled on a thin hoodie that had seen better years, and headed for the service elevator. The cameras followed her down to the lobby, then lost her as she stepped out onto the street. I should have turned the monitors off then. I should have gone to bed. Instead, I kept watching the external feeds out of habit, scanning the perimeter the way I always do before locking down for the night. That was when I saw it. 3 blocks east of the tower, on a poorly lit stretch of 6th Street where Koreatown fades into the rougher edges of MacArthur Park, 2 men stepped out of the shadows. They wore dark jackets, hoods up against the wind, and moved with the practiced confidence of predators who knew the cameras did not reach this far. Aisha was walking quickly, head down, clutching a small plastic grocery bag that held the last of her tips, maybe $20 in singles and change. She never saw them until it was too late. The first man grabbed her from behind, one arm locking around her throat while the other clamped over her mouth. The second stepped in front and drove a fist into her stomach. I watched in frozen horror as the grocery bag flew from her hand, apples and a loaf of bread scattering across the sidewalk like broken promises. She fought, God, she fought, with a desperation that made my chest tighten. Elbows, knees, anything she could use. But she was half their size, already weakened by weeks of too little food and too little sleep, and they were fresh with cruelty. They slammed her against the brick wall of a closed pawn shop. One of them yanked her hoodie open, saw the embroidered logo of my tower on the uniform shirt beneath, and laughed, a sound that carried even through the grainy feed. "Look at this. Works for the Korean prince in the glass castle." The other spat on the ground. Time he learned his streets ain't his anymore. Then the beating began in earnest. Fist to the face, kicks to the ribs when she crumpled. A knee driven into her back as she tried to crawl away. They took her phone, her tips, the cheap wedding ring she still wore in memory of a husband lost years ago. But they did not stop there. This was not a robbery. This was a message, carved into her body with deliberate, vicious precision. Every blow was meant to be seen, to be remembered, to travel back to me. I was already moving before my mind caught up. Phone to my ear, barking orders to Jason and every available man. 6th and Berendo, now, bring the doctor. My voice sounded foreign, raw, stripped of the calm I had spent decades perfecting. I grabbed my coat and was in the elevator before the first car even left the garage. By the time we reached the scene, the attackers were gone. Aisha lay curled on the cold concrete, blood pooling beneath her cheek, breath coming in shallow, wet gasps. The wind whipped her torn hoodie around her thin frame like a flag of surrender. Streetlights caught the bruises blooming across her dark skin, purple and black, against the exhaustion that had already made her look half ghost. One eye was swollen shut, her lip split, ribs almost certainly cracked. She tried to push herself up when she heard footsteps, terror flashing across her face even through the pain. "It's all right," I said, kneeling beside her. My voice came out softer than I intended, almost to strangers. "You're safe now." Her good eye found mine, wide with confusion and fear. She did not know who I was, only that I was a man in an expensive coat, surrounded by other men who moved like soldiers. Her body trembled violently, not just from cold or shock, but from the sudden, dizzying realization that the world had tilted again. One moment walking home to her son, the next beaten half to death by strangers who hated the building on her shirt. And now this, someone powerful kneeling in the filth beside her. "Please," she whispered, voice cracked and timid, barely audible over the wind. "My boy, Malik, he's with my cousin. Don't let them." The words broke something open inside me, a violent, searing rupture that felt like grief and rage and tenderness all at once. I had seen violence before, ordered it, witnessed it, survived it, but never like this, never directed at someone whose only crime was cleaning my floors for minimum wage. Someone who carried the weight of a child and $58,000 in debt and still got up every morning. I slipped off my coat and wrapped it around her shaking shoulders. The cashmere engulfed her, swallowing her small, battered frame. She flinched at the touch, then went very still, as though afraid to believe it was real. "I have you," I said, and the promise came out fierce, almost desperate. "No one will touch you or your son again." In that moment, looking at her bloodied face turned toward mine, confused, terrified, yet still holding on to a thread of hope, I felt it. A surge so powerful it nearly knocked the breath from me. Love. Immediate, overwhelming, burning through every wall I had built. Not pity, not duty. Love. The kind that reorders a man's entire world in a single heartbeat. I lifted her carefully into my arms. She weighed almost nothing, and carried her to the waiting car. Her head fell against my chest, trusting, despite everything. and I felt the last pieces of my carefully constructed isolation shatter irreparably. The war with the Russians had just become personal, and I would burn the city down before I let anyone hurt her again. The hospital released Aisha the next afternoon with painkillers she could not afford to fill, a compression wrap around her cracked ribs, and strict instructions to rest for weeks. Dr. Grace Lee, my private physician, had examined her through the night in the tower's medical suite. Stitches for the split lip, ice for the swollen eye, X-rays confirming 3 fractured ribs and deep bruising that would darken for days. Aisha listened to every word with quiet, numb obedience, but I saw the calculation behind her good eye. Rest meant no work meant no pay. No pay meant eviction notices and an empty refrigerator for Malik. When the discharge papers were signed, she stood slowly, wincing as the wrap pulled tight. Her thin frame looked even smaller in the borrowed sweats one of my staff had brought, clothes that swallowed her the way my coat had the night before. She kept her gaze lowered, voice soft and careful. "Thank you, Mr. Park, for everything. I'll pay you back somehow." The words were polite, rehearsed, the kind spoken by someone who had learned long ago that pride was a luxury she could not keep. I told her she would not be going home tonight, that she and Malik would stay in one of the guest residences on the 48th floor, fully stocked, secure, no rent. I expected gratitude, or at least relief. Instead, her shoulders drew inward, fear flickering across her bruised face. "I can't. I have my shift tonight. If I miss another day, they'll fire me. Malik needs—" Her voice cracked on her son's name, and she pressed a trembling hand to her mouth, as though holding back a sob would make the truth less real. The truth was brutal, laid bare in that moment. $58,000 in debt, a cousin who could barely cover her own bills, a little boy who had already learned what hunger felt like. And now this, beaten for wearing a uniform that represented a building she could never belong to. The injustice of it clawed at me, a violent tearing thing that made my chest ache with something deeper than anger. How many nights had she walked those same streets, thin hoodie against the wind, praying nothing worse than cold would find her? How many times had the world punished her simply for surviving? I wanted to promise her everything, safety, plenty, a life where fear was only a memory. But promises from a man like me carried weight she could not yet understand. So I simply said, "Your job is waiting whenever you are ready. No one will take it from you." She searched my face, cautious curiosity warring with exhaustion, then nodded once, small, uncertain, trusting against every instinct that had kept her alive this long. But by evening, she was gone. Security feeds showed her slipping out the service entrance at dusk, still wrapped in the compression bandage, moving with the careful stiffness of someone pretending the pain was bearable. She took the bus south, 3 transfers, to collect Malik from Brittany's care, then walked the last 8 blocks to their apartment because the fare had run out. I watched it all on the monitors, my hands curled into fists so tight the knuckles went white. She was defying medical orders, defying rest, defying the fragile safety I had offered, because poverty left her no choice. Less than 4 hours later, the lobby camera caught her again. She had changed into her cleaning uniform, the same one torn and bloodied the night before, now roughly mended with safety pins. Makeup, applied with shaking hands, tried to hide the worst of the swelling. Long sleeves covered the finger-shaped bruises on her arms. She clocked in at 11:45, exactly on time, and began her route on the 20th floor as though nothing had changed. I could not stay away. I took the private elevator down, the ride silent except for the roar in my head. Guilt, rage, and that burning new love collided inside me like storm clouds, tearing at every seam I had sewn shut years ago. How dare the world demand this of her? How dare it force a woman with broken ribs to scrub floors so her child could eat? And how dare I, owner of this tower, master of half the city, have allowed her to remain invisible for so long? When I stepped into the corridor, she was on her knees wiping a baseboard, breathing shallow to spare her ribs. The overhead lights caught the sheen of sweat on her forehead, the tremor in her thin arms. She did not hear me approach until my shadow fell across the floor. Then she froze, rag dripping in her bucket, and looked up slowly. The shock in her one good eye was absolute. Confusion flooded in next, dizzy, disorienting, as though the world had tilted again. She tried to stand too quickly, swayed, and caught herself against the wall with a sharp gasp of pain. Mr. Park. The name came out timid, almost a question, laced with the fear of someone expecting punishment. I'm sorry if I had to come back. Please don't. I knelt in front of her, careful not to crowd the space she needed to breathe. Up close, the damage was worse than the cameras showed. The purple bloom across her cheekbone, the split lip scabbed and raw, the exhaustion carved so deep it looked permanent. Yet there was steel beneath it, quiet, defiant steel that made the love inside me surge hotter, fiercer. You should be resting, I said, voice low, rough with everything I could not yet name. Her gaze dropped. I know, sir, but Malik. We're short on rent again, and the hospital copay. She stopped, ashamed to have spoken the truth aloud to a man whose shoes cost more than her monthly wage. The humiliation in her voice cut deeper than any blade. I saw it all in a flash. The sleepless nights counting coins, the cold meals skipped so her son could have seconds, the wind that found every hole in their windows. And now this, returning to work broken because the alternative was worse. I reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and brushed a stray strand of hair from her bruised cheek. She flinched at first, then held perfectly still, breath-catching in cautious wonder. From this moment, I said, no one in this building will ever ask you to choose between healing and survival again. Your shift ends tonight, paid, every night you need, and when you come back, it will be because you choose to, not because you must. Tears welled in her eyes, shock giving way to something fragile, almost unbearable. She swayed again, dizziness from pain and disbelief, and I caught her gently before she fell. For a long moment, she simply breathed against my shoulder, small and trembling in the circle of my arms, the weight of years of unfairness pressing down on her all at once. In that quiet hallway, surrounded by the scent of bleach, and lemon polish, time seemed to stop. Aisha leaned against me, her slight weight barely registering in my arms, yet it anchored me more than any empire ever had. Her breathing was shallow, ragged around the edges of pain, and every small shudder sent a fresh wave of fury and tenderness crashing through me. I had ordered men to their knees with a glance, commanded respect from rooms full of killers, but here I was, undone by the fragile trust of a woman who had every reason to fear me. She pulled back slowly, eyes wide with a storm of emotions, fear giving way to confusion, confusion to a cautious, dizzy wonder. The overhead lights were harsh on her bruises, turning the purple shadows into something almost unreal. She touched her cheek where my fingers had been, as though testing if the gentleness had been imagined. Why are you doing this? Her voice was soft, restrained, laced with the timid respect of someone speaking to power she could not comprehend. I'm just the cleaner, Mr. Park. Nobody important. Those words struck like a physical blow. Just the cleaner. The woman who had walked through fire to feed her child, who had returned to work with broken ribs because the world offered no mercy. And I, Sung Min Park, owner of towers and territories, had let her remain unseen for 2 years. The remorse that had been gnawing at me since the attack now tore open, violent and raw. Guilt flooded in, hot and suffocating. How many nights had she suffered while I dined alone in luxury? How many times had the cold winds found her thin clothes while I slept under heated silk? I helped her to a nearby bench in the alcove, the one meant for security guards between rounds. She sat carefully, wincing, one hand pressed to her wrapped ribs. I remained kneeling, unwilling to tower over her in this moment. You are important, I said, the words coming out rougher than intended. More than you know. Her good eye searched mine, curiosity flickering beneath the fear. Then dizziness hit. Her face paled, and she swayed forward. I caught her again, steadying her until the wave passed. Shock, pain, exhaustion, and the sheer disorientation of kindness from a stranger who held her life in his hands. Tears slipped down her cheeks, silent and unstoppable. I don't understand, she whispered. Men like you don't see people like me. The truth in her voice shattered something else inside me. I thought of my mother's final days, the hospital bills that arrived like clockwork long after she was gone. I had paid them all, but the helplessness lingered, a poison I had buried under power and isolation. Now it surged back, intertwined with this fierce, burning love that had ignited the moment I lifted her from the sidewalk. Love that demanded I protect her, not just from Russians in the shadows, but from every injustice that had crushed her spirit. "I see you now," I said quietly, "and I will not look away again." She stared at me, numbness settling over the confusion, as though her mind could not process the shift from despair to this impossible gentleness. Then, in a voice barely audible, "Malik, he's waiting for me at home. If I don't come back tonight." The mention of her son twisted the knife deeper. I stood, offering my hand. "We will bring him here, tonight, safe." Hesitation flickered, suspicion born of too many broken promises, but the exhaustion won. She placed her small, calloused hand in mine, trusting despite everything. The contact sent fire through me, that overwhelming attachment deepening into something I could no longer deny. I called Jason from the elevator. "Send 2 cars to Aisha's apartment. Collect her son and her cousin Brittany. Quietly, no questions from neighbors." Then to security. "Clear the 48th floor guest residence. Stock the kitchen. Real food, not cafeteria trays. Pediatric supplies. Everything a 6-year-old might need." By the time we reached the private medical suite on the top floor, Dr. Grace Lee was waiting. Aisha's eyes widened at the space. Soft lighting, real wood furniture, a view of the city that turned the lights below into stars. So different from the fluorescent glare of public clinics and overcrowded emergency rooms. She sat on the examination table, timid again, as Grace gently checked her vitals. I stood back, watching the contrast tear at me. My world of quiet luxury enveloping a woman who had known only survival's sharp edges. Grace confirmed the ribs needed more rest, prescribed medication I would have delivered immediately, and left us alone. Aisha looked at me then, curiosity overtaking the numbness. "This place, it's like a dream, but dreams don't last for people like me." "They will now," I said, and meant it with every fiber of my being. Hours later, Malik arrived, wide-eyed, clutching a worn stuffed tiger. Brittany trailing with a small duffel of their belongings. The boy ran to his mother, careful even in his excitement, sensing her pain. Aisha held him close, tears falling anew, relief, disbelief, the emotional rupture of safety after years of teetering on the edge. I watched from the doorway, the love inside me surging to an almost painful intensity. This woman, this child, they were mine to protect now, not as property, but as the crack in my armor through which light had finally entered. Outside, Jason reported the first confrontation. 2 Russian scouts spotted near the tower perimeter, testing boundaries. I stepped into the hall, voice deadly calm. "Send a message, politely. Tell them the next one who comes within 5 blocks answers to me personally." The war was escalating, but for the first time in decades, I had something worth fighting for beyond territory, and I would face every shadow to keep it safe. The guest residence on the 48th floor became a sanctuary overnight. Soft lighting warmed the spacious rooms, the kitchen filled with fresh fruit, milk, cereals, and ingredients for meals Aisha had only seen in magazines. Malik explored with wide-eyed wonder, touching the plush sofa as though it might vanish, while Brittany hovered nearby, whispering questions she was too afraid to ask aloud. Aisha sat on the edge of the king-size bed in the master bedroom, Malik curled against her uninjured side, his small hand clutching hers. She looked smaller than ever in the vast space, thin shoulders rounded, bruises stark against her skin, eyes reflecting a storm of disbelief and lingering fear. I stood in the doorway, watching them, and felt the love inside me swell to something almost unbearable. It was no longer a surge. It was a tide, relentless and deep, pulling me toward her with a force I could not fight. Every instinct screamed to shield them from the world that had wounded them so cruelly. Yet the guilt gnawed harder now, violent and unrelenting. I had the power to change lives with a phone call, Yet I had let this woman suffer in my own building for years. The remorse was a living wound, tearing wider with every glance at her battered face. Aisha noticed me first. She straightened carefully, wincing, and her voice came out soft, timid. "Mr. Park, this is too much. We can't stay here. I don't know how to repay." "There is nothing to repay," I said, stepping inside. The words carried more steel than I intended, born of the inner turmoil that churned like fire. "You are safe here, that is all." Malik peeked at me, curious but shy, hiding half his face behind his mother's arm. Brittany excused herself to the kitchen, sensing the weight in the air. Aisha's good eye met mine, confusion deepening into cautious wonder, then dizziness as the reality pressed in. She swayed slightly, pressing a hand to her forehead. "I feel like I'm dreaming, or maybe losing my mind. Men like you don't help people like us, not without wanting something." The raw honesty in her whisper cut deeper than accusation. I knelt beside the bed, bringing us eye to eye, careful not to crowd her space. "What happened to you last night? It was because of me, because of this building, because of the work you do here." My voice dropped, rough with the rage I kept leashed. "Those men, they targeted you to send a message to me." Her breath caught, fear flashing bright before numbness settled again. She pulled Malik closer, as though shielding him from the truth. "A message? I'm nobody. Just trying to keep food on the table, keep the lights on." Tears welled, spilling over without permission. The humiliation of admitting it aloud, to me, of all people, made her voice tremble. $58,000 in debt, eviction threats, nights when the only meal was plain rice because everything else had gone to medicine or bus fare. The cold winds that found every crack in their walls, while I lived in heated perfection 50 floors above. I reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and covered her hand with mine. She flinched at first, then held still, the warmth of the touch disorienting her further. "Tell me everything you remember about them," I said gently. "Every detail, it will help." Her voice was barely above a whisper as she described them. 2 men, Eastern European accents, one with a scar across his knuckles, the other with a tattoo of a bear on his neck. They had laughed about teaching the Korean boss a lesson. Each word fueled the storm inside me. The Russians. Sergei Ivanov's crew, pushing harder into Koreatown, testing how far they could go. I stood, the decision crystallizing like ice over fire. "Jason," I spoke into the phone the moment I stepped into the hall. "Pull every camera feed from 6th and Berendo. Cross-reference with known Ivanov associates. I want names, addresses, habits. Tonight." Jason's voice was steady, but I heard the edge. "Already on it, boss. 2 matches, Viktor Petrov and Alexei Morozov. Low-level enforcers. They were spotted bragging at a bar in East Hollywood an hour ago." "Good. Bring them in. Quietly. The warehouse on Alameda." I returned to the residence to find Aisha standing at the window, Malik asleep on the bed behind her. The city lights reflected in her eyes, beautiful and distant, a world she had only ever cleaned. She turned when I entered, unease flickering. "What's going to happen to them?" "They will answer for what they did," I said. The calmness in my tone masked the violent tension building inside, the need to make this right, to erase the pain they had carved into her. Fear crossed her face, then deep confusion. "You're going to hurt them? For me?" "Not for you," I corrected softly, stepping closer. "Because no one touches what is under my protection. And you." My voice caught, the love surging so fiercely it nearly stole my breath. "You are under my protection now." She stared at me, dizziness returning as the words sank in. A powerful man, dangerous in ways she could sense but not fully grasp, claiming responsibility for her safety. The emotional rupture was visible, tears falling faster, shoulders shaking with silent sobs that held years of exhaustion, humiliation, and sudden, overwhelming relief. I wrapped my arms around her carefully, mindful of her ribs. She stiffened at first, then melted against me, small and trembling. The contrast between her fragility and my strength never more stark. In that quiet moment, holding her as the city sparkled below, I knew the war had truly begun. Not just with the Russians, but with the injustice that had brought us here. And I would end it. For her, for Malik, for the heart she had unknowingly awakened in mine. The medical suite transformed into a quiet haven as the hours stretched into early morning. Doctor Grace Lee worked methodically, her hands gentle as she reapplied fresh bandages to Aisha's ribs and checked the stitches on her lip. Aisha sat still, her good eye fixed on the floor, but I could see the tension in her thin frame, the way she held herself rigid, as though expecting the kindness to vanish like a mirage. Malik slept soundly on the couch nearby, exhausted from the whirlwind of the night, his small chest rising and falling in peace that his mother had not known in years. I paced the perimeter of the room, my phone buzzing with updates from Jason. The Russians, Victor and Alexei, had been located at a dimly lit bar in East Hollywood, laughing over cheap beer as though beating a woman for her uniform was just another night's work. My men had them now, secured in the warehouse on Alameda. But the confrontation had not been without incident. One of my scouts reported a brief standoff at the bar's back door, the Russians drawing knives before realizing the odds. No blood spilled. My orders were clear. Alive, unharmed for now. Yet the tension lingered in every message, a reminder that Sergei Ivanov would not take the abduction lightly. He would see it as a declaration of war. The guilt inside me twisted sharper with each passing minute. I had built this empire to protect what was mine, yet Aisha had suffered under my shadow. The remorse was a relentless storm now, violent and churning, clashing with the love that burned brighter than ever. How could I have been so blind? This woman, emaciated from hunger that left her ribs sharp under her skin, haunted by sleepless nights where the cold wind howled through cracked windows, had endured alone while I commanded fortunes from glass towers. The contrast tore at me. My dominance over half of Koreatown's underworld, my influence that could move mountains or crush men with a word, all meaningless against her quiet, heartbreaking resilience. Grace finished and stepped aside, giving me a nod. She needs rest, Mr. Park. No work for at least 2 weeks. The ribs are stable, but stress will set her back. Aisha looked up then, her voice soft and timid, laced with the respect of someone addressing a figure far beyond her reach. Thank you, Doctor. And you, Mr. Park. I don't know what to say. This place, the doctor, it's more than I've ever had. But I can't stay. My job, my apartment, Malik's school tomorrow. The words carried the weight of her world. The humiliating scramble for every dollar, the dread of eviction notices taped to the door at dawn, the hunger that gnawed after skipping meals to pay for Malik's shoes. She shifted, pain flashing across her face, and I saw the dizziness return, a wave of disorientation as the room spun from exhaustion and the surreal shift from destitution to this luxury. I moved closer, kneeling again to meet her gaze. Your job is secure, paid leave, the apartment. Brittany will stay there if she chooses, but you and Malik remain here until you heal. My voice was steady, but inside the emotional tension raged, a fierce conflict between the man I had been and the one awakening now. Love for her surged, passionate and all-consuming, demanding I shield her from every shadow. Confusion clouded her eyes, then fear, as curiosity flickered through. Why me? I'm nobody, just trying to survive. The debt, $58,000, it never ends. And now this? It feels like a trick. The admission broke her composure, tears spilling as she wrapped her arms around herself, the humiliation of confessing her poverty to me burning fresh. Sleepless nights counting pennies while the wind chilled her bones through thin blankets, emaciation from meals stretched too thin, all laid bare in her trembling voice. The injustice of it fueled my torment, drawing a raw, aching empathy that blurred my vision for a moment. There is no trick, I said softly, taking her hand. She did not pull away this time, though her fingers trembled in mine. You work in my building. You are under my roof. That makes you mine to protect. The words hung between us, charged with meaning she could not yet grasp. Shock rippled through her, deep disorientation as the powerful man before her claimed responsibility for her life. She swayed, emotional numbness giving way to pain, and I steadied her, my arm around her shoulders, careful of her injuries. In the quiet that followed, I revealed more. I know about the debt, the late nights, the hunger. I have seen it on the cameras, though I should have seen it sooner. The confession came heavy, laced with remorse that gnawed like acid. Tonight changes that. The Russians who attacked you, they work for Sergei Ivanov. They wanted to weaken me by hurting those in my territory. Her breath hitched, fear sharpening her features. Because of me? Oh God, Malik. Panic rose, chaotic and numbing, her body tensing as though ready to flee despite the pain. I tightened my hold gently. They will not touch him, or you, ever again. The promise ignited something in her, curiosity turning to tentative trust amid the tears. Brittany returned with tea, and we sat together. Aisha's hand still in mine as Malik stirred and climbed into her lap. The tenderness of the moment contrasted sharply with the absurdity outside. A woman crushed by misfortune, her life a series of cruel blows, now held by a man whose wealth could end her struggles with one signature. My phone buzzed, Jason again. They're ready, boss, but Ivanov's men are circling the warehouse. 3 cars spotted 2 blocks out. I stood, the love for Aisha anchoring me even as rage built. Hold position, I'm coming. Leaving them in Grace's care, I descended to the garage, the elevator ride a blur of inner conflict. This war had become personal, tearing at the fabric of my control. And as I stepped into the night, I knew I would face whatever came, for her. At the warehouse, the confrontation unfolded in tense shadows. Ivanov's scouts approached boldly, hands visible but eyes sharp. My men blocked the door, a silent wall. Tell Sergei, I called out, voice carrying across the lot, that Aisha Jackson is under my protection. Cross me again, and there will be no mercy. They backed off, the air thick with unspoken threats, but the suspense lingered, a promise of escalation. Returning to the tower, I found Aisha awake, watching the door with cautious hope. You're safe, I said, sitting beside her. In that moment, holding her gaze, the love burned brighter, a fierce anchor amid the storm. And I vowed silently, no more suffering, not for her, not while I breathed. The warehouse on Alameda Street stood dark and silent under the sodium glow of distant streetlights, its concrete walls swallowing sound like a tomb. I arrived just after 3 in the morning, the October wind carrying the faint scent of the nearby Los Angeles River. Jason met me at the side door, his face grim but steady. They're inside, boss, secured. No trouble bringing them in, but Ivanov's scouts followed at a distance. They know we have their men. I nodded, the rage inside me cold now, calculated, lethal. The love for Aisha had transformed it, giving the fury purpose. No longer abstract territory disputes. This was personal, carved into her bruises and her quiet tears. The remorse still tore at me, violent and unrelenting. I had let enemies grow bold enough to touch someone under my roof, someone who had suffered hunger, cold nights with no heat, the slow humiliation of debt collectors calling while her son asked why there was no milk. And I, with my towers and private jets, had done nothing until violence forced my eyes open. Inside, Viktor Petrov and Alexei Morozov sat tied to metal chairs under a single hanging bulb. Their jackets were rumpled, faces pale with the kind of fear that comes when bravado meets reality. Victor, the one with the scarred knuckles, tried to maintain defiance, but his eyes darted. Alexei, bare tattoo visible on his neck, sweated through his shirt. I walked a slow circle around them, letting the silence stretch. My footsteps echoed. Jason and 2 others stood by the door, arms crossed. Gentlemen, I said finally, voice conversational but edged with ice. You had a busy night on 6th Street. Victor spat to the side. We don't know what you're talking about. I stopped in front of him, close enough to see the pulse jumping in his throat. A woman walking home from work, thin hoodie, cleaning uniform with my building's logo. You took her money, her phone, and then you beat her for sport, because she worked for the Korean boss. Alexei shifted, the chair creaking. Orders were to send a message, nothing personal. Nothing personal. The words ignited the storm inside me. I thought of Aisha's emaciated frame, the way hunger had hollowed her cheeks long before their fists did, the sleepless nights worrying about Malik's next meal while cold winds rattled their windows, the irrational cruelty of a world that punished her for simply surviving, and these men, paid muscle, thought it was nothing personal. I pulled out my phone, showed them a photo Grace had taken for medical records. Aisha's bruised face, swollen eye, split lip. Victor looked away first. Alexei stared, color draining further. "This," I said quietly, "is personal." The interrogation was methodical. Names, routes, orders, all spilled under the weight of unspoken consequences. They confirmed Sergei Ivanov's push into Koreatown, the attack meant to test my response. When Victor sneered that a cleaner isn't worth a war, something in me snapped, not loud, but cold and absolute. I stepped closer. That cleaner has a 6-year-old son who went to bed hungry more nights than I care to count. She has carried $58,000 in debt alone, working 2 jobs while the world kicked her down. And you thought her pain was a message? My voice remained low, but the tension in the room thickened. Jason shifted, sensing the edge. Outside, headlights swept the lot. Ivanov's men again, bolder now. 3 cars circled slowly, a direct challenge. Jason's phone buzzed with reports from our lookouts. I motioned, and 2 of my men stepped out to meet them. The confrontation unfolded in the shadows, my team blocking the approach, voices raised but hands empty. A tense standoff, warnings exchanged, engines revving, but no shots. They backed off after 10 minutes, tires screeching into the night. The message was clear. Ivanov was probing, escalating. Back inside, I turned to the captives. Your boss will learn soon enough what happens when he touches what is mine. Victor laughed nervously. You think this ends here? Sergei will... I cut him off with a look. Sergei will learn restraint, or he will learn loss. I left them there, under watch, and drove back to the tower as dawn bled across the skyline. The inner conflict raged fiercer than ever, remorse for my past indifference clashing with the passionate love that now defined me. Aisha had cracked open a heart I thought frozen, and the vulnerability terrified me as much as it consumed me. In the residence, she was awake, sitting by the window with Malik asleep beside her. The city lights reflected in her eyes, soft now with pain medication. She looked up as I entered, caution giving way to quiet curiosity. Did you find them? Yes. I sat across from her, the weight of the night heavy. They will not hurt anyone again. Fear flickered, then deep confusion, dizziness as the reality sank in. A powerful man had gone into the night for her. She swayed slightly, emotional numbness cracking into tears. I don't understand why you're doing all this, for someone like me. I took her hand, the touch gentle. Because you deserve it. Because I see you, finally, and I will not let the world hurt you anymore. In that quiet moment, tenderness bloomed amid the chaos. She leaned into my touch, the contrast heartbreaking, her fragility born of cruel misfortune, my dominance forged in wealth and shadow. The love surged, anchoring me through the storm. But outside, Ivanov's cars circled again in the distance. The war was heating, and I would face it all, for her. The days that followed blurred into a rhythm I had never known. Quiet mornings in the residence, afternoons handling business from the penthouse office, evenings returning to find Aisha and Malik settling into a life that still felt borrowed to her. The tower's security kept the world at bay, but outside, the tension with Sergei Ivanov escalated like a gathering storm. His men tested boundaries daily, a car idling too long near the garage entrance, scouts spotted in Koreatown markets, anonymous threats slipped under doors of businesses under my protection. Each incident was met with measured response, my crews blocking paths, stares held until they retreated, but the danger grew, a constant undercurrent that heightened every moment. Inside the residence, the contrast between Aisha's past and this temporary haven tore at me constantly. She moved through the spacious rooms with cautious steps, as though afraid to leave footprints on the polished floors. The kitchen, stocked with fresh produce, meats, and staples she had once rationed desperately, brought tears to her eyes the first time she opened the refrigerator. Malik, wide-eyed and joyful, discovered cartoons on the large screen and toys delivered quietly by staff. But Aisha, thin from years of hunger that left her frame fragile, eyes shadowed by sleepless nights of worry, remained timid, speaking in that soft, restrained voice when addressing me. "Mr. Park, this food, it's too much, we can't." "You will eat," I said gently one morning, preparing simple bibimbap with ingredients my aunt had sent. "You and Malik both, no more skipping meals." She watched me from the counter, curiosity deepening amid the confusion. The dizziness came often, sudden waves when she realized the heat worked without fail, the windows sealed against cold winds, the pantry full. Emotional numbness would follow, then pain as memories surfaced, nights huddled with Malik under thin blankets, the humiliation of food bank lines, the gnawing fear of eviction. One evening, as rain lashed the windows, she confessed in a whisper, "Back home, when the power got cut off, we'd sit in the dark. Malik would ask why the lights didn't work, and I'd say it was a game, but it wasn't." The words unleashed a fresh torrent inside me, remorse so violent it nearly buckled my knees. I, who could light entire buildings with a signature, had allowed this suffering under my domain. The love for her burned fiercer, a passionate anchor amid the turmoil, demanding I rewrite every injustice. Closeness grew in quiet moments. I taught Malik simple Korean words, "Annyeong, 감사합니다," his laughter filling rooms that had known only silence. Aisha watched, cautious wonder softening her fear. Evenings we sat on the sofa, her careful not to lean on injured ribs, talking in hushed tones. She spoke of her father's long illness, the debt that swallowed savings, the second jobs that left her bones aching. I listened, the emotional tension building as her vulnerability stripped my defenses further. One night, as Malik slept, she asked timidly, "Why do you stay? You have everything. Meetings, people waiting for you." I took her hand, the touch sending fire through me. "Because here, with you, I have something I didn't before." The confession hung heavy, shock rippling through her, disorientation as a man of my power admitted need. Outside, danger intruded unexpectedly. Jason called mid-afternoon. Ivanov's men had cornered one of my collectors in a Koreatown alley, a bold street-level push. I arrived to find the standoff tense. 5 Russians facing my 4, words sharp, postures aggressive. No weapons drawn, but the threat clear. I stepped between them, voice calm but carrying. "This ends now. Tell Sergei the next move costs him more than he can pay." They backed down, muttering, but the suspense lingered, eyes promising retaliation. Returning, I found Aisha at the window, having heard fragments from security radios Brittany monitored. Fear flashed in her eyes. "Is it because of me? All this trouble?" The question tore at me. "It is because of me," I said, pulling her close carefully, "but I will end it." She trembled, the emotional rupture overwhelming. Tears for the absurdity of her life tangled in my world, gratitude clashing with dread. In that embrace, tenderness bloomed, her head against my chest, my hand stroking her hair. The love surged, fierce and immediate, anchoring us both. Yet the danger mounted. That night, a drive-by scouting near the tower, tires screeching, shouts in Russian. My men repelled them without incident, but the message was clear. Ivanov was circling closer. Amid the chaos, our closeness deepened. Aisha's curiosity grew. She asked about my childhood in Busan, my mother's recipes. I shared, the vulnerability new and terrifying. In quiet reflection, holding her as the city glittered below, I knew this love had become my greatest strength and risk. The storm was coming, but for her, for this fragile family awakening in my world, I would face it all. 2 weeks had passed since the attack, and the bruises on Aisha's face had faded to faint yellow shadows, though the deeper ones, inside, still lingered in her cautious movements and quiet stares. The residence had become a strange, gentle routine. Mornings with Malik's laughter echoing off high ceilings, afternoons of rest and slow healing, evenings where I found excuses to linger longer than business demanded. The danger outside had not lessened. Ivanov's men grew bolder, their scouts appearing in unexpected places, a late-night tale on one of my drivers, a sudden cluster outside a Koreatown restaurant I favored. Each time, my crews met them with calm force, blocking paths, exchanging hard stares until they retreated. But the suspense built like pressure before a storm. Inside, the closeness between Aisha and me deepened in layers. She no longer flinched when I entered the room, though her voice remained soft and respectful, laced with the timid wonder of someone afraid to believe good things could last. One evening, as rain streaked the windows again, she stood in the penthouse library, a room I rarely used, lined with rare Korean classics and first editions, collected more for status than reading. She traced a finger along the spines, curiosity bright in her eyes for the first time without fear overshadowing it. "These books, they're beautiful," she said quietly. "I always wanted Malik to have stories like this, but at the library, we could only check out 2 at a time, and sometimes the fines." The sentence trailed off, humiliation flickering as she remembered overdue notices piling up beside eviction threats. Sleepless nights choosing between library fines and bus fare, hunger that made reading aloud to her son feel like a luxury. The contrast struck me anew, my shelves worth more than her annual wage, her life a constant scramble against cold winds and empty cupboards. I stepped closer, the air between us charged. "Choose any you like, for Malik, for you." She turned, surprise giving way to dizziness, another wave of disorientation as kindness from me overwhelmed her defenses. "Mr. Park, Sung Min," she corrected softly, testing my given name for the first time. "You've done so much already. I don't know how to be in a place like this. It feels wrong, like I'm waiting for it to end." The vulnerability in her voice unleashed the storm inside me. Remorse crashed harder, violent, tearing, for every day I had let her struggle unseen. The love that had ignited that first night now burned explosive, passionate, demanding release. I closed the distance, careful of her healing ribs, and cupped her face gently. She froze, breath catching, fear and curiosity colliding in her eyes. "I have watched you for months on the cameras," I confessed, voice rough with emotion. "Your quiet strength, the way you kept going no matter what the world took. I was blind, cold, but you changed everything." Shock rippled through her. Deep confusion as a man of my power admitted weakness to her. Her good eye widened, tears welling. "Me? I'm just broken, poor, always one step from losing everything." "You are not broken," I said fiercely. "You are the strongest person I know." The words hung between us, the room silent except for rain against glass. Then the dam broke. I leaned in and she met me halfway, hesitant at first, lips trembling against mine. But the kiss exploded, fierce and desperate, years of my isolation shattering against her quiet resilience. Her hands clutched my shirt, small and shaking, as though anchoring herself against the surge. I tasted salt from her tears, felt the thinness of her frame born of hunger and hardship, and the love roared through me, overwhelming, passionate, all-consuming. She pulled back, gasping, dizziness overwhelming her, face pale, swaying as emotional rupture hit. Numbness followed, then pain as reality crashed in. A woman crushed by poverty, now kissed by a man whose world could destroy or save her. "This can't be real," she whispered, voice breaking. "Men like you don't want women like me." I steadied her, forehead against hers. I have never wanted anything more. In that moment, tenderness flooded the chaos. She melted into me again, the kiss deepening, raw, honest, bridging the brutal gap between my dominance and her destitution. The contrast tore at my heart, her emaciation against my strength, her past of cold nights and humiliation against my heated empire. Outside, danger intruded sharply. My phone buzzed. "Jason." "Boss, Ivanov's crew just hit one of our markets on Olympic. Bold. They roughed up the owner, left a message carved in the door. The cleaner next." Rage surged, clashing with the tenderness. I kissed her once more, quick and fierce. "Stay here. Lock the doors." The confrontation unfolded on rain-slick streets. my men arriving as Ivanovs retreated, a tense chase through alleys ending in a standoff under flickering lights. No blows landed, but words cut deep, threats exchanged, lines drawn. I arrived as they dispersed, the message clear. They knew about Aisha, were weaponizing her vulnerability. Returning soaked, I found her waiting, fear in her eyes. They mentioned me? I pulled her close. They will not touch you. The danger escalated, chaotic and numbing, but in her arms, the love anchored me, explosive, passionate, worth every risk. And as we stood together, city lights blurring through rain, I knew this kiss had changed everything. The war outside raged, but here, in this impossible closeness, we had found something worth fighting for. The kiss in the library lingered like a brand on my soul, changing the air between us forever. Aisha's touches grew bolder in private moments, her hand brushing mine as we prepared simple meals, her head resting against my shoulder during quiet evenings with Malik asleep nearby. The love that had exploded between us became a living flame, warming rooms that had been cold for decades. Yet the danger outside did not pause for tenderness. Ivanov's pressure mounted, slashed tires on my suppliers' trucks, anonymous calls threatening businesses, scouts appearing closer to the tower each day. My responses remained measured, blockades, warnings, presence, but the suspense coiled tighter, a promise of chaos. Then Jason discovered the crack in my foundation. It came late one night as I reviewed security logs in the penthouse office. Jason entered without knocking, face harder than I had seen in years. "Boss, we have a problem. Internal." The word struck like ice. He laid out the evidence, discrepancies in collections, tips fed to Ivanov's crew about my roots, the attack on Aisha timed too perfectly. The traitor was Daniel Lee, my lieutenant of 12 years, a childhood friend from the early days when my father still ruled. Daniel had been bleeding information for months, bitter over territory decisions, lured by Ivanov's promises of greater share. The betrayal hit like a physical blow. Remorse surged anew, violent and tearing. How had I missed the rot in my own house? The man I trusted with my life had orchestrated the message carved into Aisha's body. The love for her clashed with this fresh wound, intensifying the turmoil until my chest ached. I had built an empire on loyalty, yet blindness had nearly cost me the one person who had awakened my heart. I confronted him at dawn in the underground garage, away from Aisha and Malik. Daniel arrived expecting routine orders, but my men flanked him silently. His face paled as realization dawned. "Sungmin, whatever you heard." "The attack on 6th Street, I said, voice deadly calm. "You fed them her shift schedule. You chose her to weaken me." He tried denial, then anger, then pleading, words tumbling as fear took hold. The emotional tension peaked, chaotic and numbing. 12 years of shared meals, battles, trust, all shattered. I saw my own past isolation reflected in his desperation, the remorse for misplaced faith tearing deeper. Outside, Ivanov's men chose that moment to probe again, a bold drive-by circle of the garage entrance, engines revving in challenge. My crew moved swiftly, blocking exits, a tense standoff under fluorescent lights. No shots, but shouts echoed, threats exchanged until they peeled away. The timing was no coincidence. Daniel's betrayal had emboldened them. Back in the residence, I found Aisha waiting, having overheard fragments from Brittany. Fear shadowed her eyes, confusion deepening into dread. "Was it someone close to you?" I nodded, the weight crushing. She approached slowly, timid voice soft. "I'm sorry for bringing this trouble." The injustice of it, her apologizing for pain caused by my world, unleashed the rupture. I pulled her close, careful of lingering tenderness in her ribs. "You brought nothing but light," I whispered fiercely. Shock rippled through her, disorientation as blame shifted away. Tears came, emotional numbness cracking into sobs for the absurdity. A woman who had endured cold winds through broken windows, hunger that left her dizzy, now comforting a powerful man undone by betrayal. In that embrace, tenderness bloomed amid chaos. She held me as I confessed the depth of the wound, the love for her anchoring me through the storm. "You are the only truth I have left," I said, voice breaking. The betrayal escalated everything. Daniel's removal sent ripples. Ivanov grew reckless. His next move, a direct threat, slipped to one of my markets. A note warning that the cleaner's boy would make a better message. Fury and love collided, passionate and overwhelming. I mobilized every resource, the danger now chaotic, tearing at my control. Yet in quiet reflection later, Aisha's hand in mine as Malik slept, I knew this twist had forged us stronger. The war had turned inward and outward, but for her, for this fragile, impossible love, I would purge every shadow. The betrayal of Daniel Lee cut deeper than any rival's blade ever could. 12 years of shared history, late nights planning my father's legacy, battles fought side by side, trust I had extended without question, reduced to greed and resentment. The purge began immediately, but it was not clean or quick. It was bloody in the soul, if not always in body, tearing through loyalties and forcing me to question every face around me. I handled the confrontation myself, in the same underground garage where I had once taught Daniel how to read a threat. He arrived flanked by 2 of my men, thinking it a routine meeting. When the doors closed behind him, his bravado cracked. Pleas turned to accusations, then to desperate bargains. "Sung Min, we grew up together. Ivanov promised me what you never would, real power." The words fueled the violent storm inside me. Real power. I had given him everything, position, wealth, protection, while Aisha scraped for crumbs. The remorse for my blindness clashed with rage, the love for her amplifying every wound. I saw her bruised face in my mind, her thin frame from years of hunger, the humiliation of debt collectors while traitors like Daniel profited under my roof. The purge spread. 3 more associates linked to leaked information were brought in quietly, interrogated, stripped of roles, exiled with warnings that carried final weight. No blood in the streets, but the message was clear. Betrayal ended here. The emotional tension peaked chaotic and numbing. Old friendships severed, trust rebuilt on ashes. Outside, Ivanov capitalized on the chaos. His crews struck bolder. A midnight blockade of one of my Koreatown warehouses. Vehicles boxed in, drivers intimidated until my response team arrived. The standoff stretched under floodlights, shouts in Russian and Korean, engines idling like growls, my men forming a wall until Ivanov's retreated. Suspense hung thick, danger escalating as they probed the cracks Daniel had left. The internal bloodshed took its toll. Returning to the tower at dawn, I found Aisha waiting, eyes shadowed with worry. She had heard whispers from Brittany about trouble inside. Fear flickered, then deep confusion. Was it bad? I nodded, the weight crushing. She approached timidly, voice soft. "I never wanted to cause this. Split your people." Her words unleashed the rupture. The injustice, her blaming herself for my failures, tore at me. I pulled her into my arms, careful as always. "You caused nothing but truth," I said fiercely. "This rot was here before you. You only showed me what matters." The shock rippled through her, disorientation as guilt lifted. Tears came fast, emotional numbness cracking into sobs that held every cold night, every skipped meal for Malik, every humiliating moment of powerlessness. Now, held by a man whose dominance commanded cities, she trembled with the absurdity of it. In that embrace, tenderness bloomed fierce. She clung to me, small hands fisting my shirt, as I whispered promises into her hair. The love surged, passionate and overwhelming, anchoring us both amid the purge's aftermath. Later, as Malik napped, we sat by the window. The city sprawled below, glittering and indifferent. Aisha's curiosity returned, cautious but growing. "Will it ever stop? The danger?" I took her hand. "It will. I am ending it." The purge continued through the day. Final meetings, loyalties reaffirmed, weaknesses cauterized. One last confrontation erupted street level. Ivanov's men ambushing a supply run near Olympic Boulevard. I arrived as tensions peaked. Vehicles nose to nose, voices raised, my crew holding the line. I stepped out, presence alone shifting the balance. "Tell Sergei, I called across the divide. The next blood is his. They withdrew, but the cost weighed heavy. Returning, I found Aisha curled on the sofa, dizziness from stress and lingering pain pulling her under. I carried her to bed. The contrast, heartbreaking. Her fragility against my strength. Her past of cruel misfortune against the protection I now offered. Lying beside her as she slept, the inner conflict raged, remorse for the bloodshed, even justified, clashing with the passionate love that made it necessary. The purge had cleansed the rot, but at the price of more scars. Yet holding her, feeling her breathe steady against me, I knew it was worth every tear. This love, born from her courage amid poverty's crush, had become my redemption, and I would bleed the world dry before letting danger touch her again. The purge had cleansed the rot, but it left echoes, silent rooms where trusted voices once sat, wary glances from men who now wondered if they were next. I rebuilt swiftly, promoting loyal ones, tightening circles, but the cost lingered in my chest like a bruise. The love for Aisha anchored me through it all, growing fiercer each day, a passionate flame that warmed the cold spaces betrayal had carved. Yet Ivanov, sensing weakness, struck at the heart I had only just uncovered. It happened on a gray October afternoon, the kind where the marine layer hangs low and the city feels muffled. Malik had returned to school, carefully escorted, a discreet guard posing as a parent volunteer. Aisha had insisted, her voice timid but firm. "He needs normal, Mr. Park, Sung Min. He can't live afraid forever." The words had torn at me, the injustice of a 6-year-old knowing fear because of my world, but I relented, doubling security. The call came as I met with Jason in the penthouse, Brittany's panicked voice on the building intercom. They took him. From the playground, 2 men, masked, grabbed Malik during recess. The teacher chased, but they were gone in a van. The world narrowed to a roar in my ears. Aisha's scream echoed through the line as Brittany reached her. I was moving before thought. Elevator, garage, tires screeching onto Wilshire. The love that had been my strength turned savage, a violent, emotional tension that made my vision tunnel. Malik, the bright-eyed boy who called me Mr. Sung with shy grins, who had known hunger and cold nights in a drafty apartment, now in Ivanov's hands. The remorse crashed harder than ever, my enemies using a child because of me, because I had dared to love. Security feeds and street cameras traced the van to an industrial pocket near Vernon, Ivanov territory. I mobilized everything, crews converging, drones from a discreet contact, every favor called in. The danger escalated chaotic and numbing, reports of armed lookouts, barricades at warehouse entrances. A bold snatch in daylight, meant to break me. Aisha collapsed when I returned briefly to prepare. She was on the residence floor, knees drawn up, rocking as sobs tore from her. "My baby, because of me. Because I work for you." The self-blame was heartbreaking, her emaciated frame shaking, memories of poverty's humiliations flooding back. Nights awake listening for eviction knocks, skipping meals so Malik could eat, cold winds finding every crack while she whispered promises of better days. I knelt, pulling her against me. "Because of me," I corrected fiercely. "But I will bring him back." Fear and shock rippled through her, dizziness as she swayed, emotional numbness giving way to raw pain. "They'll hurt him. He's so little." The image fueled my torment. I kissed her hard, desperate, the passionate love surging as anchor. "I would burn everything for you both." The rescue unfolded in tense shadows. My team surrounded the warehouse, a calculated approach, no storming, but pressure. A street-level standoff emerged, Ivanov's men blocking the road, my crews matching them vehicle for vehicle. Voices rose across the divide, threats veiled but sharp, suspense thick as fog. I stepped forward, unarmed, dominance in every line. "Return the boy, now, or lose everything." Inside, through a negotiated exchange, Victor and Alexei for Malik, Ivanov's lieutenant relented. Malik emerged, tear-streaked but unharmed, clutching his tiger. I took a grazing wound to the shoulder, shielding him from a sudden shove. Pain sharp, but nothing compared to the relief. Back in the tower, Aisha's reunion with her son was an emotional rupture. Sobs of gratitude and terror, holding him as though he might vanish. Malik buried his face in her neck, whispering, "Mama," while she rocked him. The contrast stark. Her fragility from years of cruel misfortune, now wrapped in safety I bled for. I watched, shoulder bandaged by Grace, the inner conflict peaking. Remorse for bringing this danger, love burning brighter for the family I would die to protect. In the quiet aftermath, as Malik slept between us, Aisha turned to me, voice soft. "You got hurt. For him. For you both," I said, pulling her close. Tenderness bloomed amid the chaos, the three of us tangled in exhausted peace. The threat had escalated to its cruelest, tearing at every seam, but it forged us unbreakable. Ivanov's boldness had cost him. The war teetered on the edge, but with Malik safe in my arms, the passionate love anchoring me, I knew I would end it, for them. The bullet graze on my shoulder throbbed under fresh bandages as Grace finished in the medical suite, but the pain was distant, nothing compared to the storm inside me. Malik slept deeply in the resident's bedroom, exhausted from terror and reunion, his small face peaceful at last. Aisha sat beside him for hours, holding his hand even in sleep, as though letting go might make him disappear again. When she finally emerged, the residence was quiet, city lights casting long shadows across the marble floors. She found me in the living room, shirt off while I changed the dressing myself. The wound was ugly, raw and red, but her eyes fixed on it with fresh horror. "You got shot. For my boy." Her voice was soft, restrained, trembling with the timid respect that still surfaced when emotion overwhelmed her. I turned, meeting her gaze. "I told you, I would burn everything for you both." The words hung heavy. Shock rippled through her, deep disorientation as the reality sank in deeper. A man of my power, wounded in a rescue born of love for her child. Dizziness hit. She swayed, reaching for the wall. I caught her, pulling her gently against me, mindful of her lingering tenderness. She was still thin, the emaciation from years of hunger evident in the sharp line of her collarbone, the way her body fit too easily into my arms. The contrast tore at me anew, my world of heated towers and endless resources against her past of cold winds slicing through thin walls, sleepless nights counting coins for milk. Tears spilled silently. "I don't know how to do this," she whispered. "All my life, it's been me and Malik against everything, bills that never stop. Nights I went to bed hungry so he wouldn't. Landlords banging at dawn. And now, you risk your life for us. It doesn't feel real." The confession unleashed the emotional rupture. Sobs shook her small frame, raw, tearing, carrying every humiliation, every cruel twist of fate. The injustice of it fueled my torment. This woman, who had endured more than anyone should, now weeping because kindness felt impossible. I lifted her carefully, carrying her to the bedroom where soft lamplight glowed. She clung to me, fear giving way to desperate need. I laid her down, but she pulled me with her, hands trembling as they traced the bandage. "Let me take care of you," she said, voice breaking, "for once." The tenderness shifted, charged. She cleaned the wound with hands that shook from emotion, not pain, her touch reverent. Each brush of her fingers ignited the passionate love inside me, surging, overwhelming and fierce. When she finished, she pressed her lips to the edge of the bandage, soft, grateful, burning. The kiss that followed was raw, vulnerable. Years of my isolation meeting her guarded survival. Lips met in desperation, hands exploring with careful hunger. She arched into me, the thinness of her body a heartbreaking reminder of what the world had taken, yet her response fierce, giving. I mapped every curve, mindful of healed ribs, whispering her name like a prayer. She whispered mine back, Sung Min, timid no longer, but filled with wonder and need. We moved together slowly at first, then with increasing passion, surrender complete. Her gasps mingled with mine, the contrast intensifying everything. Her fragility against my strength, her past of deprivation against the luxury surrounding us. Every touch was gratitude, every sigh release from years of holding alone. The love exploded, anchoring us in the chaos. Passionate, all-consuming, healing wounds deeper than skin. Afterward, wrapped in sheets that smelled of clean warmth she had never known, she lay against my chest, tracing the line of the wound. Tears fell again, but softer. "I was so scared," she admitted. "When they took him, I thought that was it, the end of everything good." I held her tighter. Never again. The remorse inside me peaked, violent tension for the danger I had brought, clashing with joy at this surrender. She had given herself completely, trusting despite every cruel lesson life taught her. Outside reports filtered in, Ivanov's network fracturing after the failed kidnapping, crews pulling back in confusion. A final street confrontation brewed near Vernon, his remaining loyalists blocking a supply route in desperate defiance. My teams handled it with calm dominance, a tense standoff dissolving as they retreated, the message clear. The cost was too high. In our quiet, the tenderness deepened. Aisha's fingers intertwined with mine, her breathing steady at last. The emotional peaks, her rupture, my turmoil, settled into profound peace. This surrender, vulnerable and passionate, had bound us beyond danger. The war waned, but here, in each other's arms, we had found redemption. The weeks after Malik's rescue passed in a fragile calm, the kind that follows a storm when the sky clears but the ground remains soaked. Ivanov's network crumbled, internal fights over the failed kidnapping, debts unpaid, loyalists scattering. My final response was measured. A quiet meeting on neutral ground in a downtown parking structure, representatives only. No raised voices, no weapons visible. I laid out terms, complete withdrawal from Koreatown, compensation for disrupted businesses. They accepted, the standoff dissolving into handshakes under fluorescent lights. The war ended not with chaos, but with exhaustion on their side and unbreakable resolve on mine. In the tower, healing took deeper forms. Aisha's ribs mended fully, the bruises faded entirely, but the shadows in her eyes lingered longer. Night still brought her awake with a start, reaching for Malik, whispering his name until she felt him breathing beside her. I would pull her close then, my bandaged shoulder a reminder of the price, and hold her until the trembling stopped. The love between us had become transcendent, passionate, fierce, a force that bridged every divide. Her touch grounded me, her quiet strength reminding me that power without heart was hollow. One December morning, as frost traced patterns on the windows, I took her to the rooftop garden I rarely visited. The city spread below us, holiday lights beginning to twinkle even in daylight. Malik played nearby with a new remote control car, laughter carrying on the crisp air. Aisha stood at the railing, wrapped in a coat that finally fit properly, no longer swallowing her frame. She had gained weight, slowly, steadily, from meals shared without rationing. The emaciation that once haunted her features had softened, though the memory of hunger remained in her careful way of savoring each bite. I joined her, handing her an envelope. Inside was a bank statement, her medical debt, $58,000, cleared to zero. Paid anonymously months earlier, before the attack, when I had first learned of her struggle through building records. She stared at the paper, confusion giving way to shock. You did this? Before everything?" I nodded. "I saw you suffering. I could end it, so I did." Dizziness hit. Her hand flew to the railing, balance lost as emotional rupture overwhelmed her. Tears fell fast, numbness cracking into sobs that carried every sleepless night counting bills, every cold wind through cracked windows, every humiliating call from collectors while Malik asked for cereal. "Why?" she whispered. "I was nobody to you then." "You were never nobody," I said, voice thick. "You were carrying the world alone. I had the means to lighten it, that is all." The injustice of her past, crushed by misfortune while I lived in excess, tore at me one final time. Remorse peaked, violent and cleansing. I had waited too long to act, letting pride and isolation blind me. But now, seeing her free of that chain, the love surged transcendent, burning away the last shadows. She turned into my arms, sobbing against my chest. I thought debt would follow me forever, that I'd work until I broke and it would still be there. No more, I promised. You are free. Malik ran over then, hugging her legs, and we stood together, a family forged in fire. The contrast remained stark, her past of deprivation against the life I could offer, my dominance tempered by the vulnerability she drew from me. Yet in this moment, wealth and poverty dissolved. Love, raw, human, compassionate, transcended skin color, class, everything society tried to divide. I had turned away expansion offers from Ivanov's crumbling territory. Stability over endless growth, protection over conquest. Aisha had taught me that true power lay not in taking, but in giving. Knowledge that reshaped my world. Knowledge that real strength meant choosing family over empire. Knowledge that compassion was the greatest education. Knowledge that life lesson after life lesson came from seeing another's pain and acting. Knowledge that education in humanity mattered more than any ledger. Later, in quiet reflection by the fireplace, Aisha asked about the future. Will you keep doing all this, the business? I thought of the life lessons learned through her courage. I will build something safer for us, for Malik, for children who deserve better than we both knew. She smiled then, genuine, radiant. The timid respect remained in her voice, but trust shone brighter. Love had won, proving wealth could not buy it, poverty could not kill it, differences could not stop it. This is the greatest life lesson. Love transcends everything. It is the deepest education we receive. It is the knowledge that changes empires. It is the life lesson that heals fractured hearts. It is the education that makes us truly human. To everyone watching, I wish you good health, a joyful life, and daily peace. If this story touched you, please subscribe to Crimson Romance Stories, like this video, and share it with someone who needs to hear that love always finds a way. Tell me in the comments, how did this story make you feel? Does it connect to real life for you? Share your thoughts and emotions below. Goodbye for now, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video.